Hello there and welcome to a new knitting episode from me. My name is Helle and I'm coming to you from Denmark. And let me start by apologizing for my rather croaky voice. I've literally just risen from the sick bed that found me pretty much horizontal for 4 or 5 days. So my voice sounds the worse for wear, but I'm not sure when it's going to sound normal again. And I've been wanting to film for a few days, so there it is. I have a few things on the program, of course, today. I've got almost three finished objects. Let's just say 2 finished objects and 2 works in progress. 2 of which are one of each is an accessory, which is new for me. Kind of new. I haven't made many of them, and for sure I need to make more. And, actually, I guess there's another work in progress, so I guess there's 3. One of them got off to a false start a couple of times, and I have some new yarn for that for the second time. And there's a soon-to-be work in progress that I got some yarn for, so I guess you could call those acquisitions as well. And then somebody asked me a couple of questions about myself. So I'll just chat a little about that at the end. No need to go into that yet if you're not interested in that, which is completely fine. And then also a little bit about the Nordic knit along at the end, which is coming to a close, but you still have time. I think the last video where you can comment on what you've knitted will be at the beginning of the new year, so that you can actually get to wrap up stuff, and also so that I have time to finish some new things until that video. But of course, as you know, if you've been here before. If you have not, welcome. If you have, welcome back. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and listen to me go on about my objects and maybe get some knitting done. I hope you get some knitting done. And as you can see, winter has arrived in Denmark, so I wanted to sit in front of this window, even though it's a bit of a challenge when it comes to light, because it sort of reflects in the windows. But I was hoping maybe to get a little bit of help from the snow outside, so I hope it works. It's such a delight to have the snow, because for some years now we haven't had as much snow as we used to. So everybody's loving this, especially the children, and frankly I am too, because everything is just, it's lovely outside and everything is lighter inside. It's so nice. So it's definitely sweater weather here. Try to say that many times in a row. Sweater weather. Well, maybe it's just as a foreigner that that's a problem. Okay, but of course I can't start without a quote, which you know if you've been here before. So let me get that not out of the way, but let me do that. A couple of quotes. I tend to sort of not be able to limit myself to one quote. And maybe that's because so many weeks pass between one episode and the next that things accumulate, so I have more things to express or something, I don't know. So the first one is a tiny extract, a small sentence from the poem Song of Myself by Walt Whitman, and it's the well-known phrase, "I contain multitudes." And of course he meant it as this kind of inclusive I, which means you, we, all of us. And the reason why I bring it up here is that in my last episode, when I wore the soldatna, which was very colorful for me, I guess, it caused some reactions. I was a little surprised, to be honest. It was as if I'd signed a contract to only go neutral ever, and I have not. Sure, I love neutrals, as you can see, but every now and then I want a pop of color, which I think I've also said before. If I could show you my wardrobe, you'd be able to see that, yes, there's a lot of gray, a lot of black, a lot of white, a lot of blue, and then there's a bit of emerald green, hot pink, tiny bit of brown, and just, colors that are not neutral. So I think we need to make sure that we don't place ourselves or anyone else into narrow a space, to confine a space, because there's always room for expansion. And just because you prefer neutrals, or I prefer neutrals, or love neutrals, or some of you prefer colors and don't actually like neutrals, it doesn't mean that we can't sometimes dip our toes into something else and see what that brings us. If everything was the same all the time, it would be a little boring, I think. And also, if there's one thing that I've learned in yoga philosophy when I studied to be a yoga teacher, is that we need to sort of, well, you can do what you want, of course, but it's a good idea to let go of attachment, to let go of saying, I'm someone who. You know, if you say, I'm someone who, then you've already limited yourself to say, I'm someone who knits with neutrals only, or I'm someone who prefers, etc. Of course, you can prefer things, but that's different from being attached to it. So if we have a very strong preference for something or a very strong aversion to something, that's kind of our ego talking. And that's definitely my job, actually, now, my full-time job, to let more and more go of ego. It's very difficult, and it's not as if we need to let go of ego all the time. Our egos are healthy in many ways, and they should be there. But when they're not healthy, when they take over, we should maybe be a little wary. Anyway, this is already getting too long. The other quote is by a Danish philosopher called Løstrup. And I've no idea how to translate this, which means I haven't even done my job very well to prepare. I'll first say it in Danish. Den enkelte har aldrig med et andet menneske at gøre, uden at han holder noget af dets liv i sin hånd. I would translate it perhaps a little freely, because otherwise it's going to sound weird. Every time you interact with another human being, you hold part of this person's life in your hand. And I think that's really apt. I use it as a quote often in my teaching back in the day. And I think it's true in any situation where we meet people, including on social media. So apropos of something that I read Helle Locatelli writing some weeks back on her page on Instagram about a pattern. She said that she didn't purposely set out to be unclear in her patterns. So when people wrote to her, you know, sometimes they would be a little harsh. I've heard that from other designers as well. And that goes for podcasters as well. Sometimes I think we come off as a little harsher than we think when it's social media. And I think if Helle Locatelli could say it, she's like the sweetest person. I think I can quote her as well. So she said, be kind. Okay, because you always have somebody else's life in your hands. So apropos that, I want this to be a safe space, a safe place for both you and me. Okay, so that out of the way, let me get down to brass tacks here. Just comment on the Weekender. A lot of you wrote to say that if I wanted to, I could over dye it. Well, it was brushed alpaca, so I don't think that was ever going to really work. And as somebody said, well, or as a lot of people said, it looked intentional. I'm not sure. I think that's so nice of you to say. The whole wabi-sabi effect would be gone if I had chosen to repair it somehow. And I, you know, at the end of the day, honestly, I didn't care. And somebody wrote also, when I talked about perfection, this idea that we need to be perfect and the outcome always has to be as we had envisioned it. Well, often it's not. And then what do? We embrace that, or we try to embrace that. And somebody said that she'd struggled with perfection for years and had once seen the quote by somebody that said perfection is the highest form of self-abuse. I had to gulp there a little, and I think it's true. Sometimes if we require perfection from ourselves, maybe we can be a bit too harsh on others too. I don't know. But it serves no one to strive for perfection. So the Weekender remains with different color stripes, and there it is. I'm happy with it. I've worn it quite a lot, and I don't care. Okay, so of course my first finished object is what I'm wearing, and it's Blouse No. 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And it has this sort of, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it walking up and down on my deck today, because it's we've got quite a lot of snow. Plus, it'll be a little too cold. So I'll see if I can insert a clip where I'm wearing it somewhere in the house, preferably with a bit of white wall behind us. Not that we have a lot of that, but I really love the sleeves. Can't tell maybe so much, but it's a really simple long sleeve t-shirt, I feel. And as I mentioned last time, if you've seen that, I decided that I wanted something a little simpler for a yarn that wasn't necessarily simple. Okay, first it has this kind of boat neck, and the pattern had the option of maybe doing an I-cord here, I think, and I did not want to do that. And I really like a boat neck. It's a little tight in the sleeves, but that's because of my arms. But I really like the shape of it. I like these kind of bell sleeves. I think I made a few more increases than I was supposed to, because I made the size 2, and there I think the increases are only like that, and I wanted a bit more of a dramatic effect because it was the sleeves that I fell for when I saw the photo. And you just bind off both here, and here was the cast on edge, of course, and here you just bind off. And so it's just it rolls a little, which is neat. I like that. It has these contiguous shoulders. I don't know if you can see. Which is a neat construction. I hadn't tried that before, and I really like it. The pattern comes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sizes. Up until 4, from a small, extra small to 4XL. The circumference up here, maximum circumference is 125 centimeters, which is not a lot, granted, but it is with negative ease of 10 centimeters, which means it should go up to 135 centimeters. 140, I can say she writes here. It's knitted on 5mm needle, and which is a US 8. And it's pure stockinette, as you can see, and I really like it with this yarn. And I have to say, I bought 2 skeins of this yarn when I was in Paris, and you can see I still have quite a lot left. I'm thinking that maybe I should extend the hem a little. It's a little, I wouldn't say cropped, but I knitted it to the specifications, but it's a little short maybe. But that's not going to make much difference when it comes to this yarn. I would say that up to at least medium, even large maybe, you can get away with 2 of those skeins. This is a fingering, and it's this La Bien-Aimée, of course, and it's in the color Water Lilies, and it's cashmerino, which is 75% superwash merino, 15% cashmere, and 10% nylon. And as I've said before, yes, it's superwash, but I have to take into consideration that my skin is very sensitive. And I just can't wear many things, certainly not next to my skin. I mean, I don't think there's anything. Well, that's not quite true. The Soldatna I can wear next to skin. Not if I get too hot. And I learned of this recently in somebody's video. I forget where I heard it, but apparently when you get hot, your pores open, and then you feel whatever itch or the fibers in whatever yarn you're wearing even more, which makes of course sense. And I have noticed I do get an itch more if I'm hot. So when I wore the Soldatna in the Big Birdie, it felt nice, even though I only had a tank top underneath, until I started being a little hot. And here it's the same. So for those of you who have sensitive skin, I know quite a few of you have written to say that you have sensitive skin as well. Well, maybe give the cashmerino from La Bien-Aimée a try. And also, this is the new silk mohair that I showed you in the last video, where I talked about this blouse number 1 first. And it's silk mohair by a Danish company called Créa de Luxe. And what's interesting is that it has 45% silk, 33% mohair, and 22% baby alpaca. So I heard a long time ago that it was supposed to be pretty soft, and now I can confirm that that is indeed the case, because I usually find it difficult to wear something with mohair against my skin, and I have not got anything underneath here. And even here, where I'm usually most sensitive, I can still wear it, which is just hurrah. So I can definitely recommend, the combination, I guess, but also to use this for whenever a pattern requires a silk mohair. Now, of course, I'm not quite sure what to use the rest for. But I really love this color, and I'm not usually somebody who is hugely in love with specks, but that's, I guess, if it's very speckled. Speckles, I guess it's called, not specks. But this is just sort of moderately speckled, which I really like, and I like the sort of opalescent, variegated look. And I wore it in Nice when I was in Nice as a travel guide, and I really wanted it to wear it down there because I thought it would probably be ideal for transition weather, and I did manage to wear it, and I especially wanted to wear it right next to the sea because I felt it has these ocean colors, but I think it's also quite appropriate to the weather today because it also has a kind of frosty look to me. Okay, so this pattern was really easy to follow, well written, simple, easy, and it was such a joy after a really challenging but fun knit like the Soldatna, and before that the Snow Crocus, to just knit stockinette. There's a little bit of something to consider up here and of course down here, but it was just so nice to just sit there and knit stockinette, and especially when I still get something that I think is really nice and wearable. I've already worn it quite a number of times. And as mentioned before, the pattern was originally written for silk. I think it uses the silk from Knitting for Olive. In the original version, you use pure silk from Knitting for Olive, and in the smallest version, you use 300 grams. In the biggest version, you use 500 grams, and that's using 2 strands. So I would be quite tempted to knit it again, maybe using the pure silk. Also, that would be something that's good for somebody with a slightly higher body temperature, like me. I think the light may be failing a little here. I hope not. I hope it's not going to be too bad. Okay, so I can definitely recommend this pattern. Lovely to knit, easy to wear, and I can recommend the yarn. You probably can't hear me very well, so I'm going to make it short. But I'm sitting in Nice. Just gotten home from quite a long day. But just wanted to share with you the knitting that I began right before I left, simply so I could have something that's easy to knit on in the airport, on a plane, and in a hotel room when you're tired after a rather long day with guests. So you can probably see what it is. This is the so-called front, but I'm knitting on the Sophie shawl. I bought this yarn in Copenhagen on my birthday. I treated myself to Gepard vintage cashmere and bought 4 skeins of this beautiful gray color to knit myself a large shawl, Sophie shawl. So I jumped on the bandwagon, but I think it's going to be a pretty cozy knit. It's not the most obvious thing to be knitting in Nice, and I'm not going to be buying any yarn down here because I don't need any yarn, and also I don't think there are many yarn shops to find. It's not your most yarny place. So this was just a brief greeting, and I will see you back in Denmark. I'm just going to sit out here for a little while and knit, simply because I can. Okay, so when I went to Nice, I knew that I would be spending quite a lot of time in first at the airport, and then on an airplane, and then I actually had to change planes in Frankfurt in Germany. So I knew there'd be quite a lot of time where I would, where I would feel I would waste my time. Now that I'm back to being a knitter, I wanted to have a project with me, because otherwise I would feel that it was a waste of time just to sit around. I could have brought a book, but I did. I had audiobooks. I might get back to that actually, because there's a book I can recommend. Non-fiction. That's what I'm into these days. Well, partly. Anyway, I wanted to have a travel knit that wasn't too complicated, because I didn't want something where I would have to look at a diagram all the time or juggle several balls of yarn and, not be able to hear what somebody said on the plane or something like that. So when I was in Copenhagen on my birthday that was on the 19th of October, I went into one of the local yarn shops there called Uldstedet and treated myself to some cashmere yarn for a shawl. I'll put some footage of the unwound skeins and also of a pot with water that I put on my stove, because there were instructions. I was given instructions along with the yarn of how to steam it before using it so that it would open it a little bit. Because according to these instructions, if I washed it afterwards without having steamed it first, it would perhaps become too sort of dense as a fabric. So that was interesting. I hadn't tried that before, and it worked. It was really interesting the way it sort of bloomed, which you can see in the two before and after pictures. And this is what I have left. So I have quite a bit left. Did I buy 4 skeins? I did. 450-gram skeins. And I love this color. This is one of my favorite grays. I'm not sure how you can see it here. I love a gray color. You can't really go wrong with gray, I feel. As you've seen in the footage that I've probably already inserted from Nice, where I'm knitting it in various locations, it's the Sophie shawl. And I wouldn't perhaps necessarily call it a shawl. It's more of a scarf. Let me just put it on for you here. It's not very logical to put it on with this blouse. I'll try to see if I can film some footage of me outside where it's perhaps a little more logical. But at any rate, this was the perfect travel knit. I haven't really found out quite how to style it yet, because when I just knot it once, these ends sort of trail, well, one of them almost to my knees. So I feel like I should probably do it one more time. I've worn it a couple of times on my bike, which were where it was very practical. And I like the whole sort of, there's a lot of fabric here. I really like that. It's very comforting. And one time there was sleet in the air and I was on my bike. And I got off my bike just briefly I was wearing it like that. And I got off to just do the little Red Riding Hood thing. Actually, what I thought I looked like was this character from Emil fra Lönneberg called Tudeberg, which was quite appropriate given my house. But that was very practical. So I really love this. It's very simple to knit. Excuse me for vainly doing just puffing up my hair again. But it was really easy to knit. It's basically just garter and increases followed by decreases. And you do an I-cord on either end. So it's very simple. The only thing that's maybe not so simple is to remember what row you're on. Did I just do an increase 2 rows before, or was that 4 rows before? I found myself doubting that all the time. And I don't know why I couldn't just automatically tell. I think towards the end I could tell. But there was a couple of times where I thought, oh, I did wrong. And then I ripped the needle out, and I shouldn't have done that, because then when I had to put it back in, the stitches at the very end and at the very beginning where you do the I-cord, they sort of changed places. And I was like, which one came first? So I just put them randomly back on the needle and I kept knitting, and then it didn't look like an I-cord. So I had to rip back. And I did that a couple of times until I realized that what I should have done, which I then did the next time it happened once more, was I cast on with another skein. And, well, I had already ripped or taken out the needle. So I cast on as if to begin anew. and then I could see how the stitches were placed. And I know this is completely embarrassing and ridiculous because anybody should be able to see how the stitches are placed. But when they're like, they change position once you rip them out because of, well, how you do the I-cord. So anyway, this, I can feel that even though this is cashmere, I think that there's a little bit of bite to it. Honestly, it's not rustic by any means. It's super soft and I can wear it. But it's not as if I don't feel it. You know, it's not like I'm wearing fleece, you know, as in synthetic fleece or something like that. I can feel it, but it's okay. It's all right. I'm hoping that maybe my skin is becoming less sensitive. Probably that's a delusion. But yeah, I really like this. And I've, as I said, I've worn it a lot. It's a very simple knit in the sense that not just to knit, I mean, but as a piece to wear in your closet. You can, for me, add it to pretty much anything, whether as outerwear or something to wear inside over a shirt or a blazer or something like that. And I think it's also a typical Scandinavian in that sense because it's just a no nonsense kind of shawl slash scarf. So it's minimalist, I guess I would call it. And I think that's underlined with this color, which I think is also typically Scandinavian to use gray. I think we all, well, a lot of us like gray. And gray is one of my go-to colors, I have to say. So I was really happy to be knitting something in gray again. It has been a while. And I can say for sure that this is definitely not my last shawl. I'm really, oh my gosh, I'm so tempted to knit shawls. I'm just still trying to figure out which ones and with what yarn. Of course now I want to up my game and knit something a little more difficult, something a little more challenging, maybe with color work or with structure, something like that. But still something that's not just a work of art, if you will, but something that's wearable, because I think it's just such a joy to just throw it around you and and have that as kind of a blanket to wear, especially right now. Oh, did I mention what it was? I didn't even mention what it was. The yarn is Gepard Eco Cashmere, which is the yarn that the pattern calls for. You can, of course, use any yarn that, well, actually, it doesn't even have to fit the gauge because it would just be smaller or bigger. So, that doesn't matter. I chose this because I was in Copenhagen. I knew I could get it there. And also because I know that my skin needs something that's super soft. So I would need something equally soft for any shawl when I want it up against my neck. And the gauge is 17 stitches and 30 rows per 10 centimeters or 4 inches. And I used the needle required in the pattern, which was a 5 millimeter or US 8, yes, and made no modifications. No need to really in a pattern like that, although I have been pondering making some another one with this one has a very sort of narrow slope. I was thinking of doing something one with a deeper slope, which would be even more of a Tydebermeier, sort of a Little House on the Prairie look, but that's okay. It's not like I'm going to be wearing it with clogs anyway. So pondering shawls. Okay, so my first work in progress is this thing that you might be able to see a hint of here. Let me just remove this. And I talked to you about it, I think, last time, but had not started. Let me just get the yarn. It's the Nola Cardigan by Yamagara, and it's such a beautiful piece, I think. It's a little cardigan that uses intarsia. You can actually, you can do the intarsia for the black only, and then subsequently duplicate stitch the white in the middle. I didn't do that. I did the whole thing in tarsia, simply because I thought it was the easiest. I rarely feel like going back and doing something more. Plus, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do the duplicate stitch properly. So I thought, let me just do this. Here I have not seamed up the sleeves yet. You're supposed to seam the sleeves afterwards. And of course, the sleeves are worked flat because otherwise you would... Yeah, I thought about how to explain this. It makes sense because when you work them flat, then you carry the yarn, the black here, to where you're going to be using it again, and then you come back, and then you come back. If it was in the round, you would leave the yarn over here when you begin to knit the white, and then you come back here to knit again the black, but then the yarn would be over here. So that would be very impractical. You have to cut on every single row. So I assume that's one of the reasons why this is knitted flat. And I test knitted it, and it was out on the 1st of December. I was very honored to be asked to test knit it, and I really love it. I think it's, as you can see, I'm still missing a sleeve. But I think it's going to be something that I would like to wear over something black, definitely, because of this color. And that's because that's what I've chosen. The other testers have chosen various lovely colors in all sorts of different combinations. And it's so interesting to see how the cardigan changes. It becomes a completely new garment. It's in some of them it's really romantic, in some a little more simple and minimalist, in some little quirky, and here maybe a little more sort of statement / minimalist. I'm not sure. And as I also mentioned, I'm using Sniffernook, which means snowflake, apropos, by Kamerose in black and off-white. And here it says Sniffernook Natur, even though it also says 7111 hvid or white. And this is just sort, black. So I think I'm using 6 balls of the white and 1 ball of black. So it's certainly not a very costly garment. And the pattern is really well written. Oh yeah, let me remember to say that you don't actually have to make these wide sleeves. I think the wide sleeves are what I fell for when I first saw them on her page on Instagram when she was first knitting it. But you can knit the pattern with the regular sleeves as well. You would still have the flowers there, so that it would be more sort of tapered, where you make decrease instead of increases. And you can also make it different lengths. This is actually a little longer than the longest version, and mine is still cropped. There's she actually combines the long or the wide sleeves with a cropped body that's probably up to here maybe, and then the tapered sleeves with a slightly longer body. But I actually chose to combine the wide sleeves with a slightly longer body because I felt I would wear that more. And also I think I'm always off on row gauge, so I typically need to make it longer, in the sense that between the buttonholes I made 2 more rows per, here I forget how many rows were between here, but I made 2 more between each set of buttons or buttonholes. Over here are the buttonholes. What I did was every time I made a buttonhole on one side of the button band, which by the way is knitted on as you go, so that's quite handy, I felt. Every time I had made a buttonhole on one side, I would put a little light bulb stitch marker on the same row, so that I wouldn't have to guess where to place the buttons afterwards. And so I made it slightly 2 more rows between each buttonhole, and I also made 1 more buttonhole, so I extended it a little bit, simply because I felt it would be too short for me. And it's really cute. I mean, depending on what you wear, if you wear really high-waisted skirts, that would look amazing. I typically don't much. So yeah. So I'm really looking forward to continuing this, and I've used Snif Nook before for my very first garment after my 20 plus years hiatus from knitting. I used it, a grey Snif Nook, in my diamond jumper by an Incl, and it has a turtleneck, and I'm still able to wear it without a scarf underneath. So it was sort of a no-brainer to choose that yarn for this pattern. But I think a couple of the testers have actually used knitted and unspun yarn, and others have used, I mean, all sorts of yarns have been used. There's also one who has used a very sort of fluffy yarn here, so that it's sort of, it adds a bit of sort of 3D texture, if you will, and that's also really interesting. And oh, by the way, Nola is an abbreviation of magnolia, so these flowers are meant to represent the magnolia blossoms. So, of course, the testers who used pink for the blossoms nailed it completely. I went for a slightly more graphic look because I first saw her demonstrate what looked to me like a black and white version, but was in fact white and navy, and I just couldn't get that out of my head. And I like black and white in my wardrobe, so I'm looking forward to finishing this. Definitely a recommended pattern. I can, highly recommend it. You just got to be vigilant about the increases for the, to take notes when you're doing the increases here. Make sure to take notes when do you need to make an increase, when do you not. Because, here and over on the raglan, sometimes you only make an increase here and on the back, sometimes both here and for the button band. And I think I messed up once, and then I just compensated 2 rows further down. A little bit of imperfection in every project, I say. It's what the old Renaissance painters did, and who am I to disagree with that? So I think it's going to be nice when I block this, because I think But a cardigan, I'm very pleased to be knitting a cardigan, because I definitely have too few of those in my wardrobe. And to me, it was no big deal knitting pearls here. It was just maybe because of the yarn, but it wasn't painful or annoying. But then I'm not, particularly annoyed by pearl stitches. Okay, moving on to my next work in progress, which is so close to being finished, but I still have to call it finished work in progress because it's not quite finished. It's the Gujo collar by Knit, which is this collar, neck warmer, Helse diese thing. That is also one of the accessories that I've now finally almost made. And it's this huge collar. I'll definitely try to style it with one of my coats. But you're supposed to sort of, wear it like that. You could also pull it up a little if you want. So it looks more like a kind of a hood. I think it's so lovely, cozy yet classy, kind of cool and really nice and warm. Gosh, I'm doing this too much today. Apologies for doing the whole hair thing again. Okay, so let me show you the yarn. It's Lang Yarns, Carpe Diem, seize the day, in this amazing color, which, remember when I saw the, Caroline showed me the color card. I forget what they're called in English. Actually, I don't know what they're called, so there's no forgetting involved. But this card with little samples of the yarn. Fiber in my mouth. And it looked a little more gray on that chart or whatever. And then when I got it, it's definitely more brown. If I can compare to my Sophie shawl, you can see that that's definitely more gray. But I mean, why did I want this color anyway? I didn't. You know, I really love this color. And color. Um, I like a cool brown, especially when it's kind of grayish. And I've used a cool brown before in my spot sweater, and I have a lot of leftover from that one. So I would definitely love to use more of that. I think it's such a, I don't know, kind of a, you know, I'm reminded of woods and I don't know, something moody, a little more moody, and at the same time also kind of like a bare winter day. Yeah, like a like trees on a winter's day. It's sort of pale and I don't know what, but at any rate, the pattern is the pattern here is half fisherman's rib, which means it's a really sort of squishy fabric. You can see here. So yeah, you cast on using an Italian cast on, so it's a really nice edge here. And the carpe diem is 70% merino, extra fine merino, virgin wool, and 30% alpaca. So it's pretty soft for me as well. The only tricky thing here is that I watched quite a lot of TV. Sounds as if well, it was TV, I guess, but it was, what was it? Yeah, some really moody mythical series. I'm always into that when it's winter. But I couldn't, you know, I find it easy to knit stockinette when I'm watching the TV because my index finger on my left hand can always feel the stitches, so I can knit without looking at it. But I had to be careful here a number of times because otherwise my needle would sort of, yeah, let me see if I can show you what I mean. My needle would sort of fly into the yarn like that, and not get the whole thing because of the way it's plied, maybe. So it's not, I guess this is one of those specifications that I'm not too into, but I guess that's surely 3-plied, right? If it looks like that. So my needle would sometimes, you know, and then I wouldn't notice, and then on the next row I'm like, ooh, there's just a tiny thin strand, so I'd have to repair. And at one point it was further down, so, you know, I had to be a little aware of that. But anyway, as you can see, I don't have much to go. Well, you can't necessarily see that because you don't know how it's supposed to look. But all I have left here is actually the Italian bind off, and then Italian bind off here on the shoulders. And then it's ready, and I really love it. It's such a versatile piece and cozy and luxurious, and it's really squishy because of the fisherman's rib. I have to say it also takes a while to knit fisherman's rib, half fisherman's rib, because you knit every other row kind of twice. And it's not brioche, because even though it looks like brioche I think is where you have the yarn over. Here you knit one row, just knit stitches. The following row you knit purl, and then you knit the knit stitch into the stitch below. And as they've done before, this is the side that a lot of people consider to be the right side, but they use the wrong side as their right side. So that's the side that is outward. And I like that. It's a lot it's a little more chunky, a little more curvy, perhaps. So it feels like a kind of a bulky fabric. What needle size am I using? It's one size, so everybody should be able to knit it and wear it. And I wouldn't actually mind, well, if it weren't for the fact that black is so difficult to knit in, to see, especially if the yarn is kind of like that, I wouldn't mind having a black one and make it maybe even longer, so I could put it all the way up here and make it very sort of, you know, what are they called in Lord of the Rings? You know, those knights that ride the black horses. I forget, but sort of like that. Let me just see the needle because I forget. Oh, 4.5 millimeter, which is US 7. Okay, so that's been very enjoyable. I'm almost done. I can't wait to wear it. and style it, if you will. Okay, you've seen me on this deck before, modeling my various knits. Everything looks decidedly different now. So I finished the Gujo collar last night, and there's no need to wash it afterwards, no need to block it, because the fabric is pretty much as it is, so I could wear it straight away. I really like it. And just to show, my coat underneath is like a shawl collar, and it's actually open here. And I usually can't wear shawl collars because when you bike a lot, it's just too cold here. But this is nice and snuggly and warm. So you know, definitely something to wear in this country. I'm just gonna try to put it together with something else. Just forgot to maybe show you the little beautiful bind off here, Italian bind off with 2 setup rows, which makes it look really finished and polished, I think. And what's also nice is that you can pull it up like that, kind of make it into a bit of a hood, like that. Or you could pull it way further down so that you warm even more of your chest and your shoulders, your back. So it's pretty versatile in that sense. And it's funny because now I have these 2 pieces, and I think why I have them in these sort of muted, earthy, neutral colors is I love them, and they go with most things in my wardrobe, certainly my outerwear. And I think there's also something about accessories during the winter, even though I should be sort of leaning towards something extravagantly bright, like a pink hat or something, which I might. Even so, I'd still like to be sort of covered in all these cozy neutrals. I think it's because I like the ambience from all these mythical series and things where they wear these. And apropos, I just wanted to show you something, which is, it's a little silly, but I bought this. I haven't worn it much lately, but I bought it before I became a knitter again. And it's, I bought it on Etsy. Let me see if I can find the tag. There's a tag on here. I just wanted to show you because you can easily knit it yourself. It's called, I bought it on Etsy by somebody called Chunky Knits Tanya, who has this little tag on here. But I basically bought this cowl kind of thing, and guess what I was looking for? Can you guess? Apropos mythical series, historical series. If you guessed Outlander, you're absolutely correct. This is one of the many lovely little shawls, cowls, scarves that Claire wears in the series, and it's the same kind of color that I'm in here, as you can see. Okay, so what I also wanted to show with this, because I presume that most of you are not going to go on Etsy and buy it, is that you can easily knit it yourselves. I didn't think of that at the time because I was not a knitter yet. Not the second time around, because you can see that a big needle has clearly been used, and it's just a ring here of garter stitch, and then here it's, I think the seam is here, I imagine provisional cast on, and then it's just twisted once when you then put it on, so you could easily make that yourselves. So these are definitely the colors I gravitate to when it comes to accessories for winter, which is perhaps why I gravitated towards those colors when I was going to make the Aegyo sweater. And first, I've always wanted to make it since I first saw it last year, and then I talked to Caroline about it, and she said that she actually needed an update of the pattern because it was one of the first patterns that they made. So I've been going through the pattern, and I have begun knitting it several times. I first knitted a swatch in this yarn, which is super soft, also by Lang Yarns, called Yak, and it deserves it deserves a completely different project, because this is one of those cases where it is not a happy marriage between yarn and pattern. But I knitted this little swatch, and it looks okay, I guess. But I just felt it wasn't meant to be, and when I saw the honeycomb pattern, I would love to make a sweater in this. It's kind of similar to this. It's that cold or cool brown. This one is perhaps a little cooler, so I might prefer that. Maybe a little more gray, you can see. But it's still a really lovely brown. It's got it's slightly heathered with some white in here, some off-white. But it's yak, or 70% merino, 30% yak, so it's super soft, which was one of the reasons why I first opted for that. But this color, no. Then, along with Caroline, because she already had the pink, and she would like to maybe take a couple of photos of my sweater when I'm done, I opted for another color, which was also neutral, in the same yarn, the yak, this time an off-white, which is a really nice color. I love it. And I can already reveal that she's going to be using this yarn for something else once I've unraveled it. And this is actually how far I got. See, I've started the back, where again it's half fisherman's rib with the chunky side out. And I've begun picking up for the front pieces here. And then I stopped and I sent her a video going, are we sure about this? And I'm not sure if you can tell. This is just, I love the yarn. I love the pattern. They just don't go together. It's not a happy marriage. I don't know if you can tell, but it's as if you can see black holes. Not black holes, but yeah, gaps sort of in the yarn here. It's like this yarn is not meant to make a honeycomb pattern, or a cable here, that works, but not this type of yarn. You need something that would fill in the spaces a little more, just like the Puno that she used in her original version. But we were trying to go, hey, let's try another kind of yarn. So this is all going to come out. The yarn is going to be repurposed for Caroline for another design. And I'm going to be using a new yarn, another yarn, and might I add, a new color for me. So those of you who are only into neutrals, brace yourselves now for a little bit of, whatchamacallit, pastel candy something. Let me just show you the yarn without any further ado. I'm happy with it, and Caroline is happy with it. And I think it's so much fun. Are you ready? Look at it. It looks actually a lot brighter than it is in reality. I don't know if you can tell. No, that looks even more. It's a lavender. So it's still it's a pastel, but I think I sort of warmed to the purple when I made my snow crocus, which was a lavender mixed with a green, if you remember. And I bought that already back in February, knowing that it would turn into a dusty blue. So it was a bit of a gamble, but I felt also this sweater can sort of, it could work with this particular sweater precisely because I've seen her pink version of it. So I have begun. I'm actually in the middle of a row. What's up with that? I've begun where you begin with the back, and then I've I've knitted the top part of the back. put these stitches on hold, and I've just begun to pick up for the neckline. No, that's not true. To pick up for the left front piece. So so I think that's going to be fun. It's kind of candy flossy, and I think that's all right. I have all these earthy pieces as well, and that's one thing I also wanted to say is that I think I'm definitely when it comes to knitting, I like exploring things, and for every new piece you have the opportunity to explore a new part of yourself and potentially expand it. So I was really loving moving back to these sort of earthy, muted tones after the Soldatne with all the fiery, bold colors. But likewise, now that I've finished this one and I'm finishing this one, it's also nice to be moving into this sort of, I wouldn't say call this necessarily bold, but, and it's looking, it's not, this is not the color it is in real life. It's a lot cooler. Yeah. It's a cool lavender, I would say, and otherwise I wouldn't be able to wear it because I don't look particularly great in warm colors. I don't think. So this is fun for me. I don't think I have anything lavender in my closet. Maybe unless you count the snow crocus. So I have not usually been drawn to purple. So this is the first. But the Puno yarn is the yarn that the pattern was originally made for. I've used it before in my Bowie sweater, and it's a delightful bulky weight yarn consisting of 68% baby alpaca, 10% mulesing free fine merino wool, and 20% PA, something or other for the net. Okay, so it's also pretty soft on my skin. And I'll give you more details about that pattern as I knit more of it. The final acquisition is for Gada, the Gada sweater that I'm going to be testing for Aegyo Knit. I'm going to be a little late. But I've chosen these two colors, and again, my gosh, it's weird because they look a lot darker on screen. This is pale rose. This is more of a coral peachy rose. This is Marilyn or Marilyn from Isea, and this is their silk mohair. So I'm going to be casting that on soon, I hope. I just have not had time. Just a couple of questions that I wanted to address. Somebody asked me about my background, how I got into various things, and I just briefly wanted to touch upon that. So, and thank you for the question. And then also wanted to recommend a book that I've been listening to and a wise person whose podcasts I've been listening to or watching on YouTube. And then a question that Caroline was asked in an interview recently that I wanted to try to answer as well. And then the Nordic knit along. So first, a little bit about my background. I won't make it a long chat. Just briefly, education-wise, I have an English major, and in Danish, English major also means a lot of focus on language because English is a foreign language. So it's not just literature; it's also literature. So there's a lot of translation and composition and phonetics and stuff like that also involved, as well as culture. I have two minors, one in French and one in intercultural relations. So those three areas have always been and are still a huge interest of mine. And I was a teacher at a college of education, i.e. a teacher training college, for many years until I quit a few years ago because I was no longer as curious. I had already taken another degree in, what's it called? Foreign language pedagogy in Copenhagen, at Copenhagen University. So I felt I'd sort of gotten to be as much of an expert in the field as I could and had taught that for many years. And it was really fun and interesting and a worthwhile job. And by the way, there's one thing that I remember learning there from one of my professors whose articles I'd used at the college. And she said when when we talked about why learners make errors. Some of them are actually pretty predictable depending on what is somebody's first language, and some of them are recurring even though they've been taught something. So why do they do that? Well, because we all, every time we're subjected to something new, when we learn new things, it takes a while for our brains and for our sort of systems to incorporate it. So for a long time there will be this whole sort of process of accommodation, and after a while, after a lot of practice, there will be the process of assimilation, which is Piaget's learning theory. And then once you assimilate something new will crop up, and then you will learn something new and make new errors, make new mistakes. And she said there's no learning without goofing. And she was a well-known, well-renowned professor of English as a foreign language in Denmark. So I think it's something to remember, whether you're a child learning a language or you're an adult learning to knit. You will never not make mistakes if you continually try to learn new things. It's just not possible. So try not to see mistakes or errors as setbacks, but as new opportunities for growth. That is essentially what they're able to give you, and you can't improve on something either without making mistakes. So never feel down. Don't get brutal on yourself. Don't be hard on yourself for making errors. We all do, and it should be a natural part of the learning process, of any learning process. Anyway, when I quit, I wrote for a couple of years. I wrote this one book called England Revisited: Musings of a Danish Anglophile, hence the name of this podcast video channel, which was first about Denmark and about my life, still to some extent is, but has now branched into knitting as well. And that whole writing adventure was fun and interesting and definitely demanding, definitely full of making mistakes. But it was also demanding in a very sort of, there were a lot of egos in that world, and it was difficult. It was difficult to knock down doors. It was interesting and fun, but at the end it was just too, something about it didn't feel as if I was heading down the right path. Even though I completely enjoyed writing that book, but I wrote that in English. Apart from that book, I wrote in Danish, and it was a real joy to write that book. I could easily have followed it up with a sequel at the time, because there was so much I love about England that I could easily have written a second book. But I ultimately didn't feel happy. I decided to quit that from one day to the next. I sort of closed the door on that. And everybody said, well, you can always get back to it. And I said, yeah, except I'm not. And then I became a part-time travel guide. And that's also just, let's try that out. Then I started making these videos, translating some knitting patterns. Then last year I decided to take the education to become a yoga teacher. So it's been very varied, I think, because I was within the framework of an institution for many years. And I wanted to sort of burst free of those very sort of clear-cut frames and just be my own person, be my own agent, a free agent, if you will. So right now I'm a part-time yoga instructor, part-time travel guide, part-time YouTuber, part-time podcaster, part-time translator. Did I say that? And I'm, I don't have any need to say I am this or I am that. I just want to try things out and see where it takes me. I think that's the fun of it, and that's where I can learn some things. The reason why I probably studied English is that maybe I should say that differently. The reason why I love the English language is probably that I partly grew up with it because I lived in the United States for 4 years when I was a teenager. And then again, I spent a semester in London when I was a student. So it's always been part of my life. I read most of my books in English, and I listen to loads of podcasts in English. Apropos, I wanted to recommend a book by an author called Michael Singer. It only depends on what you're into. It's very sort of, well, there's the potential for spiritual or self-development. He has written a book called The Untethered Soul, and Living Untethered, I think, is the follow-up, and they're absolutely brilliant. I've listened to the audiobooks while traveling or knitting, and I can't get over them. I've listened to one of them twice or three times now, and I'm going to probably do it the fourth time. So if you're on that path of trying to develop as a human being and become wiser, maybe check out Michael Singer. I wouldn't necessarily listen to his podcasts on YouTube because it becomes, to me, a little more entertainment-like, whereas the audiobooks are very calming. And I had a lot of epiphanies while listening to them. The other absolutely brilliant man that I've been listening to on off for a while now, and this is not to say that I just listen to these things. As I said, I also watch a lot of sort of mythical historical series. Right now I'm watching The White Princess, which is all about the War of the Roses in England, right up my alley. But I've also been watching and listening to this brilliant man called Gabor Mate, who is this Hungarian-Canadian doctor and just general wise man. He has there are so many interviews with him, and he has just so many interesting things to say about how you treat your body and how your way of behaving in the world influences your health. And he's written a book called When the Body Says No. And it's just, I love looking at him. I love listening to him speak. There's just something so relaxing and wise about him. I really just enjoy him. So, go check him out if you're into any of that. Okay, so I just briefly wanted to broach this question that Caroline from Agunit was asked in an interview. Not to sort of jump the gun on the interview, but here's my 2 cents anyway. The question was, why do Danes only knit Danish patterns? Okay, so there's a lot of stuff loaded into that question, I feel. Unless you're careful, you could easily interpret it as judgment, in the sense that we're not supposed to knit only Danish patterns, Secondly, there's the assumption that Danes do knit only Danish patterns, which I'm here to tell you they do not. So there's that as well. But having said that, of course Danes knit Danish patterns, just like Americans knit American patterns, etc. So that's completely fair. But I think the reason why we typically knit mostly Danish patterns, or that a lot of Danes do at any rate, is that three things. For one, it's what is most known here. When you go into a yarn shop here, you'll see samples by Petit Knit, by My Favorite Things Knitwear, by Anna Wenzel, Line Holme Samsø, all these Danish knitwear designers, and Agunit. So that's what we see. That's what people see when they go to their local yarn store, mostly. So that's one thing. Apart from that, it's also the aesthetic. I think these designers and many other Nordic designers exude a particular Nordic aesthetic, and there's a reason why, because that's what we generally, a lot of us gravitate toward. And so while generalizing a lot there, I think it's just that a lot of them are typically Scandinavian, typically Nordic. And like, for instance, this, I said, I think it's typically Nordic. And I think this is actually kind of typically Nordic as well. So this, not sure, maybe it's in its simplicity. So I think that's completely fair. But finally, I think one of the major reasons is that the patterns are in Danish. Not very many patterns out in the world are translated to Danish. And knitting from a Danish pattern is completely different from knitting from an English pattern or a pattern in English. The abbreviations used in the English knitting language are so dramatically different that I remember the first time I read through a pattern, and I've lived in the United States studied English, I just looked at it and went, what? What is this? Mumbo jumbo / hieroglyphs. I just couldn't decode it at all. It took quite a lot of effort. And people have actually written to me, Danes have written me to ask, do you know if the soldatna exists in Danish? Do you know if this pattern exists in Danish? And no, they do not. Which means that that's going to prevent a lot of Danes from knitting them. Not because they don't like them. Not because they don't every now and then want to move a little away from their Nordic neutral aesthetic. Because I think a lot of us do. It's just very difficult to sort of crack open that code of English knitting patterns. So I think that's basically why. I think those are some of the overall answers anyway, and maybe, and I'm sure there are other answers as well. It's just something I thought was interesting. The question itself is interesting. Okay, I'm going to be wrapping this up in a minute now. I just briefly want to mention the Nordic Knit Along. I've mentioned it a few times since it was kicked off, but it's basically just giving you the opportunity to knit from a Nordic pattern, i.e. a pattern by a knitwear designer from the Nordic countries, one of the Nordic countries, be it Norway, Sweden, or Denmark, or Finland, or Iceland, or the Faroe Islands, or Greenland, or using a yarn that's Nordic. Maybe do both. And there's a group on Ravelry you can join, and there's a hashtag on Instagram, and it was basically for you to explore that if you wanted to try it out. And there's a few prizes. There are, of course I didn't bring them, 2 skeins of Isa Alpaca 2, is it? I forget. Yarn that I have in a lovely sort of slate blue color. Then there's a project bag made by a lovely viewer from New Zealand. Then there's a pattern by Agonit, pattern of your choice. And then I think I might throw in something else. I'll get to that in the final podcast before ending the knit along. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I made some Nordic patterns this time around. Because I'm not being a very good role model if I only knit sort of patterns by anybody but Nordic knitwear designers. So I've done 3 patterns by 3 different designers just recently. So I hope it wasn't too annoying listening to my croaky voice. I have to say, I don't have much voice left now, but it was definitely worth it. It's been really nice chatting to you, my camera. But it's been nice knowing that I've been talking to people out there who are also into knitting, and it's been nice sharing with you what I've been up to. I'm not sure when I'll be filming again, because I'll be going to London for a few days during December to get in the proper Christmas spirit. If I can't get in London, I don't know where to get it. But let's see, I've got some ideas up my sleeve. I hope you found something that was useful to you, or inspirational, or just interesting. And I'm so glad that you kept me company here, and I'm honored to keep you company, maybe while you're knitting or doing a chore or whatever. So thank you for letting me into your life for a little moment, and I hope to see you back again. And I wish you a joyous December wherever you are. In case anybody was wondering, which you can't tell, because I sometimes get questions, I'm wearing my black Doc Martens underneath here. They almost look like ski boots or hiking boots with all this snow. They're really practical, kind of 4-wheel drive, off-road footwear in this weather. And it's the version or the model that does not have a yellow seam. Those were the ones I used to wear many years ago. Now they're just completely black, and pretty much go with everything I wear in the winter. And it's a little after 1:30. in the afternoon. You can kind of see that the sun is somewhere up there, but it's already feeling just a little bit darker.